Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of MOJO Rising, How to Make Cancer Suck Less. I'm your host, Julie Stevens, and I'm joined today by, of course, the great Oscar Sierra. But we have someone that is near and dear to both of our hearts with us today, and that is Dr. Russell Jaffe. Dr. J, who I'll be referring to for the rest of our episode, is someone who has come around and met most of the greats of our world, whether that's from a political or a medical or a metaphysical perspective. He knows everyone, but it's because of the lineage he's brought up with. He was a true MD as he was raised. He was educated at Boston University, but he went out to disprove everything that seemed a little fishy in his world and met the greats and learned from them, and has been able to create this massive knowledge base of the best of conventional and what we would call traditional healing into one modality. So we're bringing to you today one of the best in the world in really understanding how to heal our bodies. So we're excited to introduce you to Dr. J. So for the audience that is listening, would you mind sharing? I mean, I know how amazing you are, and let me just share. We also have Oscar on the line with us as well today. And Oscar's introduction to you was, this is the man that not only knows the Dalai Lama, most American presidents, but also knows Chuck Norris. So his span of influence is not small. So how could you possibly know the Dalai Lama and Chuck Norris? So tell us more about your background.
Well, I first did internal medicine at University Hospital in Boston in the late 60s. I then matriculated to the National Institutes of Health, was there for 19 years on the senior staff, one of the few people to actually be on the senior staff. And about 1980, I realized that from the inside, I could do little, and from the outside, maybe I could do more. So it took me a few years of doing projects like I got heptachlor out of Oahu for George Ariyoshi to get reelected. And I did the first indoor environmental quality report for Jerry Brown's first administration, and then did his health policy when he ran for president. So I've had just enough contact with politics and politicians to know that I don't want to live there, but I do not mind being the advisor to the person who wants to live there. So I have been cross-trained in TCM, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, doing a 7-year apprenticeship with Queen Wu. I had 5 years with Ramamurti Mishra in Ayurveda and yoga. So I've now become a Taoist. I don't live in the past. That makes you depressed. I don't live in the future. That makes you anxious. I live in the moment. And I want everyone to have the joy and the freedom that comes from being in the moment and witnessing life in the raw. Every 6 months, I have a whole bunch of lab tests done. And according to those lab tests, I'm about 40.
That was one of the things from your book, Thriving the 21st Century, that really hit me. And it was that biological or functional age is a choice. And that statement I have thought about for many hours, because you think age is what's on your birth certificate or your passport. But I also am living proof that I am much younger after cancer than I was before cancer because of the choices I've done and the decisions. But I think between the biological or functional age is a choice, and that 92% of the issues we face are because of the choices we make. Those two things will change me for forever. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions around those two things, because I want our listeners to have the advantages of reading your book. And everyone that listens should go out and read Thriving in the 21st Century, because the amount of information that's dropped, it's moment after moment, it's like, okay, I need to fix this, and okay, I need to evolve this and think about this differently. But let's talk a little bit about age, because I know so many people, and I think of it like I will never have a birthday again that I don't celebrate, because none of them are guaranteed. But so many people are worried about their age, but it's really that biological age that's important. So how is your biological age only 40, Dr. J?
Well, you're 100% correct. Your chronology is fixed, but your age is actually determined by how you metabolically function. It gets a little bit wonky, but there are 8 tests of epigenetic lifestyle. If you cover those 8 tests and interpret them to best outcome goal values, which is a paradigm shift to the preventive side, you can actually calculate a functional age. If your hemoglobin A1C is 5%, if your HSCRP is about 0.5, if your homocysteine is less than 6, if your lymphocyte response assay shows tolerance rather than reactive foods and chemicals, if your vitamin D level is 50 to 80, if your omega-3 index is more than 8%, if your 8-oxoguanine, now that's an unusual urine test, 8-oxoguanine, that measures how much damage your DNA is being inflicted with, and it should be less than 5. If these 8 predictive biomarkers are at their best outcome, you have a 99% chance of living 10 years, even if you're 90. For example, I hydrate all the time. If you're even 1 or 2% dehydrated, it puts a terrible stress on your kidneys, your spleen, your liver, your cardiovascular system, and your lungs. And who says that? NIH. I was part of the original task force in the 70s that looked at the question of biological and functional age. And what we learned is that a few people age gracefully, they feel and function well, they have long telomeres. That's an aspect of your DNA. And they are fit with it mentally and physically. They eat in harmony with their nature. They don't eat when they're stressed. In fact, when they're stressed, they do something that takes away the stress, like a dichromatic green light or abdominal breathing or stretching or dancing or laughing or smiling. Well, your immune defense and repair system is meant to repair you continuously. It is also responsible for eliminating cancer.
Okay.
Your immune defense and repair system depends upon certain essential nutrients being taken in, generally more antioxidants, minerals, and cofactors than years ago. But it's essential that you get restorative sleep, because the good repair and the anti-cancer surveillance happens when you're deeply asleep. There are 4 phases to sleep. There is a small window called REM sleep. And during that 5 minutes or so, if your stress level is low, your pineal gland tells your pituitary gland to release certain factors that renew, repair, and heal you. But if your sleep is disturbed, if you're not in a dark room, if you have devices that, have EMF, and where I sleep, there's no Wi-Fi. I don't need Wi-Fi when I'm asleep. You can put these devices on a timer. So my bedroom, where I spend about half an hour transitioning from the doing of the day to the being of the night.
Yeah.
And I do that by stretching. I do that by taking Sleep Guard, which is a tryptophan to serotonin to melatonin natural product, about a half an hour before I'm going to get into bed. Then I do a salt and soda bath. So I do a baking soda, 1/2 to 1 cup, and Epsom salts, 1/2 to 1 cup in a tub of water. Today, very often people don't have a tub. If you just put your feet in Epsom salts and baking soda, it helps. If you can get into a warm tub of water, it's more relaxing. The piloerector muscles of your skin relax when magnesium and bicarbonate, baking soda are present. You have to have an alkaline milieu and then magnesium.
I've been studying you like crazy, trying to understand what you know. And it's so much that I have 100 questions, but none of them really get to the essence of how do we explain why this is so different, what this data gives to you, what happens if you don't have this data. And so I wanted to spend a minute just saying, like, I know what it meant to my life, but how do I ask the right questions so that you can share what this means to everyone's life?
Well, your immune defense and repair system is meant to repair you continuously. It is also responsible for eliminating cancer.
Okay.
Your immune defense and repair system depends upon certain essential nutrients being taken in, generally more antioxidants, minerals, and cofactors than years ago. But it's essential that you get restorative sleep, because the good repair and the anti-cancer surveillance happens when you're deeply asleep. I feel it's very important to help people identify how they can climb out of the survival state that they're in into a state of thriving. And that's why our book is Thriving in the 21st Century, not just surviving. And yes, we've tried to make it elegantly simple and simply elegant. Eat, drink, think, do. Let your food be your medicine. Let your medicine be your food. But remember to hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Stretch so that the fluids can bring the nutrients to the cells and take the waste products away. It turns out stretching is more important even than exercise. Yes, I want you to be active, but I want you to stretch before and after. Then probably I want to look at your digestion. And we have a digestive quintet. We have 5 products that restore and renew and rehabilitate the microbiome and the digestion. Because if the microbiome is working properly, then the metabolism will be in communion and will be working properly. And you will be detoxifying whatever burden you have. Now, I think 80% of the environmental toxins can be avoided by choosing wisely what you eat, drink, think, and do. For example, have indoor shoes and outdoor shoes, have indoor clothes and outdoor clothes. You'd be surprised, perhaps amazed, I think, to find out how much chemical harm is brought into our living space just by the clothes and shoes we wear. So I have outdoor clothes and indoor clothes. I have outdoor shoes and indoor shoes.
Dr. J, that's been my, the truth of the matter is, as many of our listeners have heard this before, I've lost 130 pounds as part of my health journey. I would have said I didn't understand how important it was to eat color that you've helped to teach me. I wouldn't have, I didn't understand the importance of eating organic so that my gut microbiome would be able to flourish, so that I would be able to absorb the nutrients I was eating. Like, there were so many things that I'm trying to figure out, how do I infuse this in the youth of America today? Because I believe that's so many of the reasons why my body created cancer to begin with.
Oh, yes. And by the way, unfortunately, today, the term turbo cancer is applicable. Younger and younger people are getting conditions of older people, we thought. For example, we used to refer to type 2 diabetes as adult diabetes. There are now so many children with type 2 diabetes, the adult part has dropped away. So we are, if I quote Mel Brooks, we are digging our graves with our forks.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
I think one thing that you might want to consider is, whatever age, whether you're talking about someone who's young and immortal or someone who's, 80 plus, remind them that simply elegant and elegantly simple wins the race.
Will you explain more?
Yes, I'm happy to. For example, many times the body speaks to us, and our response to our body is a pharmaceutical, an anti-something. a proton pump inhibitor, metformin, antibiotics, antipsychotics. I have not needed to and have not written a prescription for anything like that in 30 years. By addressing the causes, the consequences resolve.
My story shows that that is so true, but it took me to get stage 4 cancer for me to really identify the root causes and fix them.
I commend you, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to share your experience, because this is very typical. You'd be surprised, I think, how much harm, microplastic, glyphosate, and so forth, you find in toothpaste and mascara and lipstick. And we have online options that are lead-free, glyphosate-free, microplastic-free, and still beautiful. It takes effort to be healthy today. The default is survival, which means you're going to suffer, spend a lot of time in medical environments, probably take some prescriptions, and slowly spiral down. What I want is virtuous cycles. I want you to slowly cycle up. And I think this is all doable when and after people change their mind.
I think that's been the wild part of my realization, as I've shared before, is, I had a chronic disease for 13 years. No one could understand. I got it the day I got divorced. I had a stress reaction and it came out 13 years later. I took biologics every 2 weeks. I took up to 8 Zyrtec a day and 3 pharmaceuticals a day, all to mask the hives. And it took me getting stage 4 cancer to diagnose and understand exactly what was happening with the hives. So I wanted to explain to our listeners a little bit about that. And so, Oscar, I wanted to bring you into the conversation and say, you had shared early on when I came to you for the first time, kind of scared and bewildered, thinking, they want me to do chemo, but they don't want to test for efficacy, and I need to understand what I'm doing. And you sat me down and you told me 3 or 4 things. One, I can predict treatment efficacy. I can make sure how, that your body's built up so you won't face things. But you also said we need to be prepared for any way we need to pivot. And one of the things we need to watch is the inflammation. And so we need to figure out the sources of inflammation so that you can be prepared for immunotherapy, for this or for that. So, Oscar, will you share a little bit more about why you thought that was so important in that early stages of my diagnosis?
Yeah, so it's getting baselines as to what is your body fighting off, right? Is it fighting off apples and creating a bunch of interleukins and cytokines to fight off eggplants, or I think what in your case was it green grapes? Because the process of going through toxic interventions like chemotherapy and surgery, like you get cut, even if a surgery is necessary because you had a bowel obstruction, right? That's a necessary time for surgery, but the very act of having surgery creates inflammation, which is part of the healing process. So I don't want to intimate that inflammation is categorically wrong or an immune response is categorically wrong, but we want to have focused resources going to where they ought to be, not towards fighting off a innocuous threat like green grapes. I want it fighting off, staphylococcus, and you have X amount of resources. So I wanted to make sure that your immune system was being directed towards appropriate direction. So that's hence I thought that Dr. J's ELISA lymphocyte response assay would be a great idea to figure out, what is inefficient here. What are the root causes of some of this immune dysregulation, which, manifested in your particular case as hives and urticaria, which was, how often was that happening, Julie?
Daily.
Every day. And it could be so bad that I couldn't brush my hair or walk or hold a writing instrument in my hand. So it was truly debilitating if I wasn't constantly taking pharmaceuticals to block it. So it was nonstop.
So the same pharmaceuticals that were mitigating your immune response towards the hives were the same pharmaceuticals that were hampering your natural defenses against cancer. So, it's like driving with the brakes on. So, I'll let Dr. J talk a little bit about, what makes the ELISA a little different than going to your allergist and having a skin pricked immunoglobulin E test.
Which I'd done 4 or 5 different times at 4 or 5 different health systems across the US. So it wasn't that I hadn't done that in the 13 years. It's that it never resulted in anything that was material enough for me to change. And every single allergist or internist or skin dermatologist I went to said, "Oh, honey, we'll never figure out why you have hives." But that just simply wasn't true. It was the fact that I had a bowl of red and green grapes every single morning from the time I was a child. And one day my body could not handle that anymore. And me eating green grapes was poisoning myself from the inside out. And the visual you gave me, Oscar, was you have an army. And when your army is out there defending against green grapes and chives and tuna and soy and not defending against cancer, horrible things can happen. And you need your army to be focused on what's really happening versus the green grapes and the chives and things like that. And I think that's a really good visual for me of like, you want your immune system to be focused on what's really important, not on mitigating the day-to-day toxins that you come into contact with that create a response that you now have to serve. So Dr. J, what's different about this assessment or test?
The Academy of Environmental Medicine was started because some doctors recognized that delayed hypersensitivities were very important and should not be ignored. But to this day, you have conventional allergists and immunologists who do type 1 measurement that keeps them tied to the patient for life. The patient never gets better. We thought you should look at the types 2, 3, and 4 mechanisms. Now, this is a nomenclature that goes back to Joe and Coombs in the 1960s, like the Coombs test, which is a very fundamental test of blood banking. And they felt there were 4 different kinds of allergies, type 1, 2, 3, and 4. We measure types 2, 3, and 4 directly. Type 1 reactions turn out to be a spillover from the delayed reactions. So if you know the lymphocyte response reactions, the T cell immune complex and B cell meaningful antibody reactions, and you follow that substitution and rehabilitation plan, the type 1 reactions almost always, and in your case, an example, go away. So most doctors measure what's easy, either RAS testing or skin testing. If you talk to them, they will have heard that antibodies can be good or bad, immune complexes are important, T cell responses are important, but they go back to doing RAS tests and skin tests. Very often, the ingredients in supplements are inexpensive, of poor bioavailability, and they actually disturb the digestion and the microbiome. I don't think you should do that. I want to set a higher standard because I want my family and friends to be able to benefit from these elegantly simple but simply elegant approaches. Our Lifeguard, which is our capsule, that's our super multi, it has 40 ingredients in meaningful amounts. If you look at Theragram or One A Day or similar multivitamins, they typically have about 20 ingredients in daily value amounts. Now, just a moment, what is the daily value and why is it important? The daily value tells you the minimum you need to not be deficient. Regulatory systems move very slowly. Specifically, the way in which the National Academy of Sciences calculates these daily values has left us deficient. If you follow the daily value for magnesium, which is about 400 milligrams, you will slowly become deficient in magnesium because the need for magnesium is at least twice that. But if you take most forms of magnesium, you will loosen the stool, get diarrhea, and the person will probably run away from you and not think you're their friend. We have tripled the uptake of magnesium using choline citrate. And we have gone ahead and done sufficient studies to be very confident that we can triple your uptake of magnesium, correct your choline deficiency, and alkalinize and energize your battery. Voila. Ascorbate. We recommend nature's ascorbate, fully buffered, fully reduced, all L-ascorbate. Most of the vitamin C or the ascorbate or ascorbic acid that you buy was produced in the air, and the oxygen in the air damaged the vitamin C. We produce our vitamin C under a nitrogen blanket. Therefore, we get 100% of nature's ascorbate, which is fully buffered, fully reduced, all L-ascorbate. And we have a balance of minerals, because whether you need 1, 10, or 100 grams of vitamin C, you need certain minerals to make the vitamin C work better. You need magnesium to activate your ATP. You need magnesium to activate your battery. You need magnesium to activate hundreds, maybe thousands of enzyme systems.
I actually said this weekend to a dear friend, in some ways, I'm a neophyte in my journey, and I'm just learning all of these things, and I'm trying to do it all at one time, because I really believe, I know I'm one of the 92% of people who cancer was expressed because of the decisions I was making. And so I'm trying to reassess how I'm making decisions and how I eat and how I move and what I drink. But it's also around what I provide, my environment around me, and the positive psychology and the abuse I've withstood, and all of the socio-emotional factors as well.
Profoundly important. Gardner Murphy, Stanley Krippner, and others were the mentors to me in positive psychology. It turns out if you like what you're doing, you learn much faster. If you like what you're doing and smile and laugh, you assimilate the information much more quickly and effectively. So attitude is important. And what I tend to do is I ask the person what their immediate goal is. I want fewer wrinkles, or I want to make love better, or I want to have a tummy that doesn't ache, or I don't get hives. Then I want to take them upstream. I want to take them to the biochemical molecular causes, not too technical, not too wonky, but by analogy and description, the light can go off. Then I might start people on something as simple as abdominal breathing. If you can remember to keep breathing when you're under stress, your hormones are better, your neurochemicals are better, your immune defense and repair system works better, your digestion is better. So this notion of aging, I'm getting older, is a myth. It is the product of lifestyle choices. If you settle into your prayer chair for too long, if you settle into not being physically and mentally active, if you settle into not making healthy foods at home, you will slowly decline. And you can put a label on that called aging.
When I went into the hospital for my emergency surgery, I had an entire single-sized page of prescriptions. I am down to one, a thyroid hormone.
The one prescription I have written occasionally is for desiccated thyroid or Cytomel. You can take pure T3 called Cytomel, or you can take desiccated thyroid, whichever works best for you. You should never take thyroxine. The most commonly prescribed T4 medicine for the thyroid is a placebo. It's known to be a placebo. With regard to desiccated thyroid, I recommend the Canadian version, not the American version, because for some reason the FDA required that they change the formulation to include cornstarch in the US formula, and that significantly impairs the bioavailability. So desiccated thyroid, get it from Canada.
Okay.
Cytomel, T3, that's a prescription. I occasionally do recommend a prescription. If your thyroid or your adrenals are not working well, support them nutritionally, attitudinally, and with thyroid supplementation. Or sometimes I give adrenal supplementation, but always adaptogenic, always encouraging the body to feel and function better and therefore deliver the results. I never force the body through a prescription.
That's great. And you could see now, I mean, when you look at the difference, I have a single size page of supplements I take of magnesium and vitamin D and vitamin K. And my body, I mean, I truly feel like I'm in my early 30s again versus my mid 40s post-cancer, which most people, their body is robbed of the nutrition, it's robbed of the vitality, and I actually feel way more vital than I ever have before. So what you're saying, I'm a living proof of, and I know you are as well.
Oh, yes. And with regard to cancer, if you've ever heard of the occult blood test, this is a poop test that measures loss of blood and therefore risk of colon cancer. I developed that test. It was the first patent that the government had, but with me as the inventor. And for many years thereafter, on the side of the box of these hemoccult or occult blood test little strips would be my article.
So Dr. J, let's go back because I want to, for anyone who's interested in the specific ELISA LRA test.
Right.
I know you did more, then look at the 4 different types of hypersensitivity. No, I'm saying this right. The 4 types.
There are 4 types of reactions. This is the Joe and Coombs. Now, type 1 are what you had, the hives and the IgE and the rest testable. Then there are the delayed pathways, which would be B-cell antibodies, which can be helpful and neutralizing or can be harmful and complement fixing. And our cell culture measures the helpful, not the harmful. Then there's immune complexes. Sometimes the body takes in so much foreign antigen that the antigen continues to circulate in the blood when it should be removed by the liver, spleen, and kidneys. Immune complexes then form. Think of temporal arteritis. Think of having a blood vessel when you touch it, it hurts. That's immune complexes. Then the most important, and you can only get these from a cell culture, are the T cell responses. T cells have come into fashion because vaccines that measure antibodies are misleading. Vaccines that measure T cell responses may be useful. If your magnesium or your zinc is low, you will more likely take up lead, mercury, cadmium, nickel, and arsenic toxic metals. If your magnesium is topped up, your body will likely exclude those toxic metals. These are elegant expressions of biology at a time when most doctors are mechanics.
So what I just heard, and I just want to make sure I heard this correctly, is you broke down the problem by looking for all of the root causes beyond what was taught to you. So you look way beyond that. You understood that the way to measure it was simply insufficient in today's, literally the containers. So you had to redesign the actual process and rebuild how you could measure all 4 types of this in a way outside of the body. And I think you call that ex vivo.
Ex vivo, yes. This is a very important point, and I'm glad you mentioned it. This cell culture allows us to observe the reaction just as it occurs in the body. We make cell-rich plasma. This is the way this reaction occurs in the body. If you're doing a test tube test, it's in vitro. Then you have to assume that the in vitro test will be meaningful functionally and clinically. If you do an ex vivo test, that's hard. But that's directly measuring what's going on inside you with regard to lettuce or glyphosate.
For you to get to the level of specificity to tell me I can't eat green grapes, and yet I eat red grapes every single day, they're my very favorite food. I mean, that wild amount of specificity unlocked my health in such an amazing way that it begs the question, Why is this not covered by insurance? My insurance company paid $6,000 a month for one medicine. One medicine I got, Xolair biologics, every 2 weeks. It was $6,000 a month. So let's just underscore this. It was $6,000 a month that they were willing to pay.
You can spend a fortune on a biologic or an injectable or a procedure. And I will just mention that in the United Kingdom, surgeons are called Mr. because they're technicians. And the medical doctors are better reimbursed for quality of care and results. In the United States, a group of surgeons looked at this and said, we better form Blue Cross and Blue Shield to get reimbursed for procedures and prescriptions and not for prevention and health promotion. Many family physicians, many internists will tell you that they don't get rewarded for their wisdom or their results. They get rewarded if they do procedures or interventions. So that's the backdrop. I think we are developing enough momentum that wasting trillions of dollars on burying people early at high cost and suffering is not as good as we can do. And therefore, we ought to be prioritizing prevention. Now, if you're still eating processed food and you're still being sedentary and you're still being bummed out and stressed, you know, you could be doing a couple of the right things, but it's like too little, too late. What I recommend is what I do recommend in the book, Thriving in the 21st Century, which is you take small steps towards resilience, renewal, rehabilitation, recovery, and joy of living. And if you start that path, I think you'll never go back.
No, I won't.
Yes, I still think that we should pay for value. We should pay for success. We should pay for results. I'm not in charge. But I get to talk to the people who are in charge. And you know when it becomes real for them? When they have a loved one or they themselves get really sick and our approach recovers, restores them, then they begin to pay attention. So I think we have to do this one person at a time. Just save one person at a time and it'll add up.
You know, Dr. J, one of the things I was reflecting on last night on my flight home was I was thinking about you. And I've been on your email list for several months. I've read your books. I've watched your podcast. And the amount of information you give is truly heroic in trying to help people find a healthy life. And it's not in one area. You give tips across every area, the type of cooking supplies you use, the type of food you eat, the type of supplements. It's not in one area, it's in everything. And which tells me your heart is in this to heal. And everything you do is to try and make the world around you a better place. And so you have taken down one paradigm at a time thing. I don't believe in this. Like listening to you of, I didn't really believe in yoga and I didn't really believe in this and I didn't really believe in that. And one by one, you studied with the masters and realized how actual healing occurs. And so I love that anyone can go out there and follow you and learn tips every single day. But I think what you just shared is one of the most important things that you can learn. The system that's built around you is not built for individual health. It's built to maximize efficiency and profit. And so it's really up to you to identify what your strategy is to build individual health, because it may or may not be what your insurance company pays for or what your doctor recommends. That's probably part of it, but certainly not all of it. Would you agree with that?
You found me out. I come in peace. I'm in love with life. I am really optimistic about the future being better than the past. I made a choice many decades ago to serve humanity and not serve the biomedical complex. I had the choice and I made it knowing that I would be less famous but I would help more people.
Well, I can't thank you enough for making that choice. But I know, Oscar, you know Dr. J and has spent many more hours with him. So for our audience, are there other questions that you think are really critical for us to ask so that they can have the benefit of having this exposure and one-on-one time with him?
Maybe at some other time for a later podcast, I would love to pick his brain about vitamin C. I know a love of his in Linus Pauling, someone he did get a chance to hang out with. That's probably the subject of another episode.
That's a big subject, but let me shrink it down to the fact that nature's ascorbate is restorative. It protects and recycles all other antioxidants when it's present in the amount determined by your C cleanse. Vitamin C, it's a simple molecule, but it's got elegant molecular biology, and it would be worthy of an hour to go into the details to understand how remarkable, how life-giving is nature's ascorbate, but damaged ascorbate is cheaper and should not be used.
And Dr. J, I right at this moment, I want to invite you back for that hour because I know. So yes, so I was going to say, we will definitely put a pin in this conversation because we absolutely want to have you come back. I'd like to have you come back and not only share the value of ascorbate, but also vitamin D, magnesium, omegas, the ones that you've mentioned are so critical, but also why is it so difficult to understand the value of supplements because of the requirements that we can and can't, what we can and can't share. So I'd love to schedule you for I don't know, 17 more hours, but definitely 1 or 2 more.
But let's have that conversation, because if we unpack it, if we open it up and tell the truth, people will understand.
For sure. All right, Oscar, what else would you say? We've got Dr. J here for a few more minutes. Anything else that you'd say we must ask?
I think we should ask him to come to our launch party here in Atlanta.
When is that?
March 23rd.
March 23rd.
We got a band. I know that you haven't really enjoyed music since your buddy RFK was assassinated, but we have a band and some dancing and some fun other plans because Julie's in charge of planning this party, one of her superpowers. So we're going to also have you back on with my mentor, Donnie Yance, which amazingly you have not met.
Not yet, but
not yet.
Yeah.
So we got a lot more fun in store for our listeners, and hopefully some of the people that we got people flying in from Germany and Florida for our launch party on March 23rd. So,
bravo.
Yes. Well, Dr. J, from my heart, I just want to say thank you, because what you've done and pioneered in making the decision to really identify the real roots of health and the real causes of disease changed my life. And change my life in such a material way that I will now become a megaphone for how amazing you are, because I want everyone to have the data that you unlocked my health picture with, to really understand how are we feeding our body every day in ways that continuously poison us, and defer our army and our immune system to go attack and support that versus the real issues that we face in everyday world. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for unlocking a 13-year mystery that really created chaos and misery. But I also wanted to say thank you for the quote you gave earlier, that most people cause their own suffering, because that's something I will think about every single day. Pain is required, suffering is optional.
Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other back home, paying it forward, doing our best to reduce the suffering in the world by telling the truth.
That's our goal. So, well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for coming back again and being such a great advocate and supporter of MOJO. We can't thank you enough, and we're just beyond grateful to have someone of your intellectual prowess and strength and knowledge and courage as part of our team. So thank you.
I'm thrilled and delighted to be part of the team.
Awesome. Well, for everyone out there, we wish you, certainly may you live long and lucky. Hopefully you learned something today that will help you unlock part of your health picture. And Dr. J, if you haven't already, go to his website and follow him immediately, because the amount of information you get from in your email box delivered to you to help unlock your health picture is truly priceless, and he does it all at no cost. But if nothing else, go out and get a copy of Thriving in the 21st Century, page after page after page of amazing advice to help you make your body inhospitable to cancer and live your very best life. So thank you all for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.